Hey everyone, Richard here. I have something a little bit different today. I have a haul of 16 British story papers from 1964 to 1967. Not typical stuff I show, so let's just get into this and I'll show it. Alright, so like I said, a little bit of a different haul than what I normally do, but it's kind of like adjacent to what I collect. I found these really cheap, actually a ways back now. I've been meaning to do this, I just now got around to it. I found these really cheap at a flea market for about like 12 bucks for all of them. So I started doing a little digging, and these are story papers, British ones, of Rover and Wizard, and essentially they are just straight prose stories. There's no comic strips or nothing. They all have really nice cover art, but they're just weekly story publications aimed at sort of younger, usually males, boys, probably teenagers, of the sort of everyday heroes of the time. And I figured I'd show them, talk a little bit on them as we go. So yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, so we'll just go through it. It's the first one. This one's from 1964. Originally, Rover and Wizard were two separate paper story publications, but they combined in 1963. So this is an early one for their combination. Actually, they're all kind of early because 1964 through 1967. But just an early one. And this one, you see, has like an underwater theme. I believe it's a Cold War related, which a lot of them are either Cold War, there's World War II ones, but I'll show some examples as we go through it. But here's this first one. Really, really nice artwork on it. It's actually what drew me to these was the cover artwork. I did flip through some of them. I'm not going to flip through them on camera because they're kind of fragile being newsprint. But they all have various stories and various recurring characters. Here's one that is more like history focused. See right there, you got the red coats on it. Pretty cool. This next one is actually World War II focused, which is cool. This is, like I said, it's just really cool covers. Another one, this has the Scarlet Scorpion, which is one of like the recurring stories that happens. One thing to make note about this, for this period, these are not superheroes. These are everyday workers, athletes, war heroes, stuff like that. This is sort of the everyday man type of storytelling. Another one. The Red Mask. Kind of cool duel scene. This one actually has multiple stories in it. Got sort of like a werewolf looking one right there. I'm actually curious what that is because usually these aren't like supernatural. Like I said, they're usually very down to earth, so I'm curious what that one is actually about. But you also got the athlete, the star athlete there, Nick Smith, which I think is one of the recurring characters, and then you have another Scarlet Scorpion war story. Here's another war story one. And one thing that is actually really common during this period, it started with British pulps, but continued into story papers, and that is Native American themed stories. And they're from a British lens, so they're very romanticized. It's very like outdated view of cowboys versus Indians, which I mean isn't necessarily a terrible storyline, but also, you know, the issues with that viewpoint. But you see a lot of those in this. Here's another Western themed one. Very, very common for the 60s in particular for these story papers. Got a Christmas issue. I'm not sure what the time period is on this one. Here's a Christmas issue. Here's another sort of multi one, but it actually is starring probably one of the best known characters of these, and that's Matt Braddock of VC. Real bright red cover there, but he is one of the like recurring heroes of these story papers. He probably had stories in all these prior ones, just wasn't on the cover. But the North Sea Monster. This is the first of this storyline, but it has a really cool cover. Big old, is that a squid or an octopus on a drill rig or something out in the ocean? Colors pop really nice on it. Got a jungle. I guess looks like it might be wartime, but big cats. Pretty cool. The big tree. I'm not sure what this one is. Another sort of looks like history based. It might be just popular old history folklore turned into a cover for this. I know the covers don't always reflect what is in them, which is kind of an important thing to note. I feel like that's actually common for quite a few things during this period. They just have a cool cover and isn't always story reflective. Here's the last one. Has two of the big recurring characters on the front of it. It mentions Braddock up here. Then you got Nick Smith, which is the athlete recurring hero of the stories. Continuation of the North Sea Monster and whatnot. But yeah, just a really interesting little collection of paper stories that I personally had never looked in before. But when I came across them for $12, it's like, I'll pay $12 to look into it and see what they are, rather. Again, there's that cover. Some really cool stuff. I don't know if there's a market for these things or not, but just as like a piece of history, they're really cool. I might eventually try reading some of them. Like I said, I might try reading this one just to figure out what that whole Wolfman story looking thing is. But I'm going back because that's a really cool cover. And then the first one I show is probably my favorite cover because I really like underwater scenes, and I think this is a really good example of it. But yeah, that's all for this haul. If you've ever seen paper stories before, if you've heard of Rover and Wizard before, definitely let me know. I'm curious just to see how many people are aware of this. So drop a comment. I'm, again, curious. But yeah, hopefully you found all that interesting. And yeah, would you have picked these up for $12? Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone.